has been to Nerd Night about 5 times? Raise your hand if you've been to Nerd Night 5 times. Woo! Nice job, nice work. All right, raise your hand. Who has been here about 3 times? 3 times. Kind of new. All right, 3 times, very good. Raise your hand if this is your second Nerd Night. Woo! All right, second Nerd Night. And, drum roll please, we're looking for some newbies in the crowd. Who is new to Nerd Night tonight? A round of applause. Big clap for you guys. Woo! Thank you for coming.
Come on, Jonah.
So my name's Gretchen, and we have our lovely host, Dave. And I have one more question for you guys. Well, actually, it's for Dave. Dave, what is a Nerd Night?
Nerd Night is a place where people come on stage and show their best fashion accessories. But there is also a secondary element to it. Nerd Night is actually about the speakers. So we have 5 talks today, and these talks are nerdy passions of awesome speakers who have signed up to speak about them. But there is something special about these talks, isn't there, Gretchen?
What's special about these talks, Dave?
So these talks follow the Pecha Kucha format, which originated in Japan. And the Pecha Kucha format means that they have exactly 20 slides, and each slide stays on screen for exactly 20 seconds. So that leads to how many seconds of slides?
400.
Quick math. Anyone?
400.
400 seconds, very good, which is 6 minutes and 40 seconds.
Boom, baby. Do you teach math?
I work with David.
Oh, okay.
He loves stats and Excel. So yeah, so each slide will be on screen for 20 seconds, and they will be pretty short talks, and there'll be a Q&A after each talk about that nerdy thing. So this venue, which we are very grateful to have, is School Bar. Everyone give a round of applause for School Bar.
Yes, School Bar!
So School Bar usually shows, as you might expect, sports, but this time it shows nerds. And the nerds that are going to be today are all up on the stage. We're going to go through these presentations one by one. But we're going to play a game before we start. Should we play the game?
I think they're ready.
Okay. So, in order to respect the speakers, we're going to play the shh game. So how this works is I'm going to count to 3, and then I want everyone to say with me. All right, let's try it out. 1, 2,
3.
Very good, very good. Did you notice how we stopped getting people rambling on at the back by the bar? I see you. Yeah.
We're not blaming anyone. We're just pointing it out.
So please, when the speaker is up on stage, please pay attention to them, because they are being very brave to get up here and talk about the thing that they're passionate about, and please give them the time of day to listen to them, and don't try and talk about them, even if you are trying to order another beer. All right.
Should we get going?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. So our first speaker has worked very hard and is our first one to go, and it is Andrew Hefner, and he is doing the unexpected smarts of slime molds. Yes, I said slime molds. So round of applause.
Awesome. Thank you, Gretchen. You're good. Yes, as she said, my name is Andrew Hafner. I'm a journalist in Phnom Penh. I have no personal or professional affiliation with slime molds. I don't work for those guys. I don't take their money. I just find them very interesting, and I think you might as well. Now, the first thing we have to clear up in tonight's presentation is that slime molds are not molds. They're not even fungus. It's a common misconception. They're actually amoebas. And they're super diverse. There's about 900 different species of them. They're all single-celled organisms. Like I said, mostly amoebas. This is kind of a representation of how diverse they are. You can see where the fungus thing comes up. They look a little bit like mushrooms when they reproduce. And yeah, they are superorganisms, as some of us call them. They're pretty freaky. They're kind of like little alien guys. But what you're looking at there is a single-celled thing. It's hundreds of thousands or even millions of individual slime molds coming together to do something really unique. They pool their cell membranes, and then they just kind of share all the goop that's inside of them, like cytoplasm and nuclei and stuff. But it's all single cell, and they can be up to 20 kilos in mass, so they get pretty big. They don't usually get that big, definitely not big enough to engulf you, but yeah, they're just kind of goop, but it's all just one cell at the end of the day. But despite them being just one cell, they can do all kinds of stuff, such as feed on decaying plant matter in the forest. They are kind of fungus-like in that they like the damp and the dark, and they creep along, and they like to live under logs and leaves and stuff. They eat little bacteria, fungus, actual fungus and stuff, but that's not really why I want to talk about them. Because the thing that makes them interesting is that slime molds are smart. They can learn, they can sense their environment, they can problem solve, they can make decisions, they can do all kinds of stuff, and they don't have brains, they don't have a nervous system, they have no organs at all or tissues, just an amoeba, really, that has figured out how to do quite a lot of different things. The first cognitive experiments with slime molds kind of started in 2000 when Japanese researchers forced them to go through mazes. And they didn't do that because they were sadists to the slime molds, but to see if they were able to do tasks that we typically thought animals were only capable of doing. And this is not the best photo, and this is an even better photo. That's an actual image there, folks. But what the scientists found was that slime molds that were able to successfully make it through a maze were then able to do it faster in subsequent times, indicating that they could actually memorize the quickest route. And a weird fun fact, if you split a piece of a smart slime mold that's done a maze and you put it in a new slime mold, that slime mold can go through the maze as fast as if it's already done it. And that's because they're masters of efficiency. They're very good at logistics and supply chain management. So they like to not waste time and energy. They're very efficient with how they get around their environment and move nutrients to their cell. The most famous study to kind of show that was the Tokyo Transit study about 2010, where researchers, again in Japan, took slime molds and put them on a map of Tokyo. And they put little bits of oat on strategic points in Tokyo, because slime molds love to eat oats. And what they found was that the slime molds essentially recreated the subway system that human engineers and urban planners had taken years and years to design. But the slime mold was able to do it in about, I think, 20 hours, because they just process. That's kind of all they are. And these studies have been done in other cities around the world, other countries, basically seeing if the slime mold can predict or fine-tune other transit systems. This is the US, kind of in process. From what I read, it got like big chunks of it right and also identified failures in the transit system, which was kind of cool. That's not entirely how the US looks like. I've been there, I can tell you that. But then slime is also sensitive. Despite not having any sensory organs or anything, it is really good at perceiving things in its environment. It can tell light levels, pH levels, differentiate between the nutrients it needs, and recognize basic patterns, which is what's happening here. Slime mold prefers, it likes mass, it likes density, and heavy shit, which it can detect, but it also likes it to be spread across bigger areas, so it'll choose that here. There's a cool experiment that I'm going to talk about right next, where not only can they perceive stuff, but they can use it to kind of do a little bit of cost-benefit analysis. And this is the experiment. That's what it looks like. That's an actual photo from the lab. So what researchers did, they put very nutritious food under high light, which the slime mold hates, it thinks it's dangerous, and they put less nutritious food in dark, which the slime mold naturally is going to prefer. And what they found was that in most cases, the slime mold is going to want easy food. But when the nutrition level of the other food was 5 times higher than the easy food, they would go to that one almost every time. So they took it as evidence that slime mold could use the information that it perceived and then make decisions to do stuff that's against its nature based on that. All right, so where's all this going? Slime molds, they think in ways that are similar to AI, like computer AI, but are different. And in some experiments, they're able to solve problems not faster, but the strain of them solving the problem, as it gets exponentially more complicated, it's not exponentially longer, whereas it would be with some like similar computer systems. That's complicated. We're moving on. So the moral of the story is that slime molds expand our understanding of intelligence. Like typically biologists thought that only animals or mammals, dolphins and chimps and stuff could be intelligent. But we're learning that's not really the case. Not only do you not need to be an animal, but you don't even need to be multicellular. Slime molds are old. They've been around, we think, for like 1 billion years, which would seem to suggest that intelligent life has existed for a really long time on Earth, even when the creatures here were very, very simple. And it's also kind of influenced other researchers to start looking for intelligence in other species, such as different kinds of plants that can react to their environments. So, to conclude, it's a slime mold world, and we're all just kind of living in it. And also, I do work for slime molds. They paid me to be here. Thank you.
Wow, well, thank you, Andrew. There are some organisms that really don't fit the mold. So are there any questions from the audience for Andrew? Yes, we have a question over here.
If it's not mycelia, taxonomically speaking, where we
Yeah, good question.
So the question is, if it's not something, then taxonomically speaking, what is it?
Right, so he said if it's not mycelia, which is the fungi kingdom in the tree of life, what is it? So it's, that's a great question because it was in the slides, but I had to cut it. They got bounced around a lot in taxonomy because biologists, they have a lot of traits that are found in other kingdoms. They were animals at one point and plants, and they were fungus, but now they're protista. And protista is just kind of the catch-all, like, we don't really know what the fuck you are, you're a protist. Congratulations.
Right, great question. I hope your cilia is okay, though.
Thanks, Aaron.
Next question. Yes?
So, all of these individual cells come together. You said that they have shared the membrane and become one thing. At that point, now we're looking at one organism, or is it still a colony of different?
So the question is, you talked about lots of different cells coming together and then producing a mega slime mold. Are we then talking about one single-celled organism, which is the mega slime mold, or multiple multi-cell organisms?
I mean, it all depends on your philosophy, man. I mean, you know,
They would say it's one organism, but I mean, it's hard to say, right? Like, where do you draw the line in a case like that? My understanding, it's a single organism. Single cell as well.
It sounds like it's pretty selfish.
I don't know if I'd say that, David. I think they're quite cooperative, actually.
Yes?
Follow-up on that is then what happens to the nuclei when they merge? Does it multiple nucleus?
So what happens to the nuclei when they merge? Does it remain multiple nuclei, or does it merge into one meganucleus?
Yeah, my understanding is that the nuclei are free roaming. They're still there. Although, like some of the other organelles, like like the transport of stuff, they do fuse. But nuclei are still just there. They're doing their thing.
Yes, we have another question.
Do you prescribe any morality to them? Like, if you killed one versus killing a computer, would you do it worse?
So the question is, do you feel like there's any morality to slime molds? If you would kill a slime mold versus like destroying a computer, what would make you feel worse and why, Andrew?
That's a good question, man. I mean, for me, I'm like Van Helsing with the vampires and these things, and you see him just fucking go at him, stab him in the heart. I don't know, but no, I mean that's also a good question because they're similar to artificial intelligence, right? Like it's basically, as an entity, they're a similar thing, a little networked intelligence. I mean, again, I guess that's a philosophical question. I wouldn't feel that bad about killing a computer. I I feel like I've done that before when I've dropped them or gotten them wet, and I felt bad, but not morally bad. I probably feel worse about killing the slime mold because it's alive. So yeah, I feel worse about killing the slime mold.
I feel like that's something the X-Files should investigate. You know, Scully and Mulder?
That was a good one. That was a good one.
All right, any more questions? Final questions for Andrew? Yes. So the question is, you talked about them going through a labyrinth, which is pretty amazing, but what made you be amazed in slime molds?
One of those things where I think I read about it on the internet, like on Reddit or something, and then it was like, oh, that's pretty weird, knowing what's going on with those guys. And then that was years ago, so I'd periodically kind of be like, oh, slime molds, what are they up to? And like go on their Facebook and just kind of see what they've been up to the last couple of years. But then like when these guys were lobbying me to do an internet presentation, I was like, slime mold. It was a top of mind thing. Probably due to advertising.
That's great. Okay, so let's give one final round of applause for Andrew and slime molds. Thank you. So we have a very, very interesting next speaker who is going to talk about diseases we didn't have in 2021. Everyone welcome to the stage Piper. And the irony of this presentation is that she was supposed to give this talk about diseases 2 weeks ago, but then she pulled out because she was sick. But everyone welcome back to the stage. Thank you.
For the record, I am not a doctor. I do ask you to find my ignorance charming. So, go. So, in June of last year, I almost died in Ethiopia because of COVID. So the whole time I'm in a hotel room, not a hospital because there weren't any, my major thought was, this is a really stupid and boring way to die. Something that would have been much more interesting is smallpox. Smallpox in the last 100 years of its existence killed over 500 million people. Of the people who lived, 30% were blind, and all of them were badly scarred. Smallpox started with mouth ulcers. Nothing good ever starts with mouth ulcers. And then it progressed to this pestilent rash over your entire body, including your mucous membranes, which would eventually pop and scar, leaving you either scarred for life, blind, or dead. Smallpox was basically how we got the start of vaccines. It was the first disease to be destroyed by vaccines, or at least we think so, we hope so. And it was also the beginning of anti-vaxxers, because people thought it was better to risk smallpox than have their kid take a vaccine. The big baddie of diseases is, of course, the plague. The plague only killed 200 million people, which sounds like less than smallpox, but you've got to realize the plague's heyday was during the 14th century, when the population of the world was only 380 million people. So the plague did quite a number. In the UK, the plague is believed to have killed between 30 and 50% of the entire population. That's not 30 to 50% of the people who caught the plague. That's everybody. The problem with the plague is you get it in the morning, you can be dead by night. This scary little map that you can't see very well is where the plague still is today, which is half of the world. Luckily, the plague is controllable by antibiotics if you can get them. Considering that it still can kill you in 24 hours, people still get the plague. This is the bubonic plague, in which a lymph node explodes with a great infection. You mostly get the bubonic plague in your groin or your underarm, which is extremely gross and painful. There's also the septicemic plague, which gets in your blood and turns all your skin black. That one's 100% fatal without antibiotics. And the pneumonic plague, which is in your lungs, and I am very sorry if I did that thing. So you could still get the plague, but you usually get away with it. Ebola is something that is a little more recent. Ebola is found mostly in Africa. Anecdotally, Ebola has wiped out whole villages in Africa. People would say they would go to a village, they would go back 2 months later, and the whole village would be gone. People would either be dead or have gone into the forest. Congo got a lot of credit for Ebola that it probably doesn't deserve. Ebola has been found in all of these places. Ebola is a hemorrhagic fever. You start to bleed. You bleed from your eyes, you bleed from your nose, you bleed from your skin. Eventually, your skin dies and sloughs off, and it's a very, very ugly, gross way to die. We have an Ebola expert here. I'm talking in front of him. I'm horrified. So this is the eyes of a doctor who recovered from Ebola. This is his natural eye color was blue. Post-Ebola, his eyes were green. If you take vitreous fluid from his eyes, I don't know why you would do that, you can still find Ebola in his eyes. So Ebola does have a vaccine now. It generally has killed people too quickly to take off very well. Because you have to live to have carriers, but the increased traffic makes it more possible for Ebola to spread, and traffic is increasing. Kuru is my favorite and the scariest to me. So in the 50s, people who were going to Papua New Guinea to look for gold started noticing that people were dying of kuru, which means trembling locally. They also called it the laughing sickness because people would be unable to control their emotions. So what would happen would be people would get sick with this and die within a year, completely neurological breakdown. Now the people who got kuru were the foray, who were cannibals. Not the mean, I'm going to kill you and eat you kind of cannibals, but the wow, I feel really sad that you're dead, I want to keep you with me always, so I'm going to eat my relatives cannibals. And the people who got kuru were the women and children who were the ones who did the eating. So this is a brain on kuru. And it turns out that what happens with kuru is a folded protein that magically makes all the other proteins around it fold. So you eat it, it gets in your brain, and it folds your proteins. And you may not know this for decades. So you say, oh, what's the problem? I would never eat another human's brains. Well, the problem is, as we found out in the 80s, it can happen with other animals' brains too. For example, who here remembers mad cow disease? So mad cow disease is a form of bovine spongiform encephalitis that if a little bit of brain gets mixed in your hamburger can cause you to get Creutzfeldt-Jakob, which is somewhat similar to kuru. And we don't know anything about prions. They're saying now that there's a wasting disease in elk and sheep that causes prion damage all over the body. We may be eating them. We may have already eaten them. So the next plague may be among us already.
Another big round of applause for Piper. That was awesome. And I think it's fair to say I am no longer scared of Corona anymore. So, do we have any questions? Questions?
Yeah.
Anyone terrified? Yeah. Questions? In the back. Where does antibiotic resistance come from?
Antibiotic resistance is when an antibiotic doesn't kill everything, and so there are little happy antibodies who are viruses or bacteria that are like, yay, I get to live, and then they breed and then they kill you. Most people, from what I've read, not a doctor, find my ignorance charming, most people who are still alive today are alive because your ancestor had some kind of resistance to the plague. But oh my lord, one of my nightmares is antibiotic resistance plague.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have a question. What has, inspired your interest for all these diseases?
This is very sad, and I shouldn't admit this. The movie Outbreak in the 90s defined my generation. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. We all have our interests. Very good. Do we have any other questions? Yes.
In Australia, from 1788, how did the smallpox spread exponentially?
In Australia in 1788, how did smallpox spread exponentially?
That would breathe through little droplets. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Wipe out indigenous people by deliberately rubbing it into their skin. And then they go home and sleep with their wife, and that's how it's spread.
So you're saying, yes, I just want to repeat that from the UK, the spread. So they went home and then they spread it to their wives, if they had good marriages.
Okay, so what he's asking is how it spread very quickly in Australia. And he's saying that people from the UK intentionally gave it to the Aboriginals to try and kill them all off. I did have a slide about that, because the same thing has been said about India, and the same thing has been said about Americans with the Native Americans. I am not disbelieving you, sir. I think that sounds just like human beings to do something like that, and I would not be even the tiniest bit surprised. However, when I looked up to that and tried to find actual primary source evidence, I wasn't able to find it, so I took it out. I think it's very likely that they did, and I think it's incredibly likely the US did that. I think it's incredibly likely the British did that in India. I have zero doubt, but I can't prove it.
Well, good question and good answer. Are there any other questions?
Over here.
I understand there's a question.
One disease we left out is the Zika virus. Is that just something to worry about? Or?
Is the Zika virus nothing to worry about?
Okay, the Zika virus may be something to worry about, but okay, long story short, in addition to being interested in this, I'm a data analyst, among other things. I used to do medical data analysis. And Zika virus has been linked not so much to death as microencephaly. The link is really tenuous. You're finding a lot of Zika virus and a lot of microencephaly. You didn't find that at all in Asia. You found that in some South American countries, and a lot of the researchers felt that there was some third thing going on that was allowing both of those things to happen. So once again, not a doctor. Do not take my word for it, but I am not the least bit worried. Also, I'm 55, I'm not having a baby, but I'm not the least bit worried about Zika.
All right, sounds good. She's not worried. So we have one more question we'll take over here. What I'm hearing is, are we in danger of a resurgence of smallpox, and how big is that danger? Please predict now.
Okay, once again, not a doctor, no medical training whatsoever. However, in 1979, my parents took us to the Middle East, and we had to get a smallpox injection. 1980 was the last year anybody in the world got a smallpox injection, okay? And mine is probably not any good anymore. That was 1979. A few weeks ago in Pennsylvania, when I first did this nerd night, when I prepared it before I got sick, they had just found 6 vials labeled smallpox in a lab in Pennsylvania. Like, not like a CDC lab, just some random lab. Now, it turned out when they tested the material, it was actually leftover vaccine. There's a different virus that's close enough that they vaccinate for, and it was that instead of smallpox. It was just labeled smallpox. I'm terrified. Once again, I'm not a doctor, I have no way to say that, but people are dumb. That is my opinion. That is my opinion of myself. I can completely see myself having a vial of smallpox and just putting it away and not being able to find it. I spent 4 hours looking for my dog's rabies certificate today, and I should know where that is. So yeah, in my mind, it's terrifying because if smallpox breaks out again, we know how to make the vaccine, but we don't have any.
Thank you for that in-depth answer. And in conclusion, are people dumb? Yes. But let's give a round of applause to Piper. That was awesome. Thank you. So we're switching it up. We have another speaker coming to you. So we have Dylan Rogers, and he is doing the energy of life. Round of applause, please, for Dylan Rogers.
Thank you very much. Hello. So, today I'm going to be talking about energy. And a lot of you have probably heard some of the words I'm going to be talking about. Words like chakra, chi, life force, prana. But what do these things really mean? Well, the truth is, I don't fucking know. And I don't care, because that's not what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be talking about real energy, which is not to say that other stuff is fake, it's just not real. I'm going to be talking about a unit of energy that is used in almost every single biological system in which we have ever observed. And that small unit of energy is called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. It's a pretty small basic molecule. There's an adenine section of ribose and then 3 phosphate molecules. And ATP is known as the currency of energy within a cell. You must spend ATP in order to create metabolic reactions. But what does spending ATP mean? Well, we have 3 phosphate molecules here, and the bonds that join them together are known as high energy bonds. And when those bonds are snapped, it releases energy that enables the cell to perform its own metabolic reactions. So what kinds of reactions might we use energy for? Well, for example, we can talk about muscle contractions. If I want to move my body around, my muscle cells have to spend ATP in a very specific order that enables a functional movement. Or, for example, nerve conduction to send messages to and from the brain. But when we're talking about energy in general, we can separate it into 2 main categories, which are potential energy and kinetic energy. Now, kinetic energy is when something moves, but potential energy is when something is stored, which is easy to imagine if we got energy stored in a battery, but we also have energy stored in food, which we can call calories. Now, sometimes we can actually consume too much calories, but we also have a bodily function for that. We can deposit fat in adipose tissue around our body in order to store energy. So we don't have to use terms like morbidly obese to define people that are a little bit heavier. We can just say they're full of energy. Here's another example of how we can convert potential into kinetic energy. This is called the sodium-potassium pump, and it's responsible for pumping sodium and potassium ions into and out of the cell in order to regulate the electrical potential of the cell, which is important because we have to regulate it so that we can continue to perform those metabolic reactions. We can see that this phosphate molecule here is already snapped off from an ATP, which enables the sodium and potassium pump to change its orientation to be open to the outside of the cell or to the inside of the cell, which will allow the sodium and potassium ions to move. So let's think about it. The next time that you're eating a dry-aged, medium-rare, grass-fed Australian rib fillet steak, let's really think about what happens. You chew it, you crush it into a paste, you swallow it into your stomach, it gets ripped apart by enzymes, it moves into your small intestine, it spreads into the bloodstream, and finally, it enters into this guy. Now, you probably know what this is. This is a mitochondria, and it's a powerhouse of the cell. Yes. But why is it the powerhouse of the cell? Because it performs a function known as respiration, which actually produces ATP. These are ATP factory machines. To give you a little perspective, this is one liver cell. In the center, we have the nucleus, and all around the outside, all of these little black dots here are mitochondria. So there are many, many mitochondria for each particular cell. But we should consider the history of mitochondria, because this is also very interesting. It's thought that mitochondria were once upon a time an individual species, something separate from humans altogether and separate from complex life. But once upon a time, one mitochondria entered into a cell and formed a symbiotic relationship with that cell, where the cell provides a safe and comfortable home for the mitochondria, and the mitochondria can produce ATP for the cell's functions, metabolic functions. And the same is true of chloroplasts. It's just that this one became a plant and this one became an animal. So if we go back to the cell, we can imagine if mitochondria are their own separate organisms, they're not actually a part of who we are. And we know this because they actually have different DNA than what we have in our cells in the nucleus, which means that they actually reproduce and replicate themselves as opposed to us manufacturing them like we do with almost all of the other structures that exist within a cell. So let's talk about exercise for a minute. Now perhaps sometimes you look like this after maybe 60 seconds, 20 seconds, 90 seconds of exercise, and that's actually a functional reason for this as well, which is about different types of energy systems that we have. Now if I want to make a quick movement, I can do that because there is ATP already stored within all of the muscles that we have, which is represented by this blue line here. But all of the ATP that we have stored with intense exercise is used very, very quickly, and we're left with this trough of energy. So the red line is when the mitochondria is performing anaerobic respiration to produce lactic acid and energy, but it takes a little bit of time for our cardiorespiratory system to speed up enough during exercise such that we can deliver oxygen to all of the cells to perform aerobic respiration, which is represented by this green line. So these little troughs here represent those lags. So let's go full circle. Life eats life. Life sustains life. In fact, the very first cell that was ever made immediately began looking around for other cells to consume, to rip apart, to sustain their species, as opposed to the other species. Because after all, there isn't a lot of calories in rocks and sand. So your cells have been in perpetual warfare with everything else that has ever existed in the living world. So maybe it's time that you should spend some energy on your cells. Thank you.
Wow, great talk, Dylan. I mean, that topic is usually a hard sell, but I think you nailed it. Are there any jokes? I have more, don't worry. Are there any questions for Dylan? Yes, at the back, Rich. The question was, so what? I think.
Well, the implications of ATP is the result of every single biological system that has ever existed in all time. So, Nerd Night is so what? Phnom Penh is so what? Score Bar is so what? Everything is because of ATP.
All right, we had another question. Yes.
What does alcohol do to ATP?
So the question is, what does alcohol do to ATP, and do you have any with you right now?
Well, I have some sitting and waiting for me at the table over there, but not for me right now. It's an interesting question. What does alcohol do to ATP? My first instinct would to say nothing. It may have an effect on the pH, which could affect the rate at which ATP could be made within the mitochondria. But to the molecule itself, I imagine it probably doesn't do anything.
Yes, we have a question here. So, the question is not can you drink your own pee, but can you eat your own ATP to get extra energy?
Well, probably not. Because if we can go back to that slide of the graphs with the energy systems, your body actually turns over ATP at an incredibly fast rate. So all of the latent ATP that's in your system, if you start doing really serious exercise, within about 10 seconds you can see that almost all of that ATP is already gone. So you produce, in fact, here's a fun fact, you can produce almost as much ATP as your entire body weight per day, because it just snaps and then reconnects and snaps and reconnects, and because that's what the mitochondria does. Once you snap off that phosphate, it becomes adenosine diphosphate with just 2 phosphates, and what the mitochondria does is it reattaches that 3rd phosphate. So you actually go through so much breaking and creating ATP per day that it's almost your entire body weight. So if you were to consume ATP, it would almost have no effect, I would say.
Wow, excellent. Well, you can't spell energy without nerd.
G.
I'm not sure what that clap is for. We will take one more question though. One final question for Dylan. Any more questions? Lots of hands. Chris, sure.
I'm curious about different people have different metabolic rates. Different people have different amounts of ATP or different reactions to ATP. Does that have an impact on energy levels?
So the question is, do different people have different amounts of ATP, and if so, how do you score?
Okay, well, yeah, obviously there is so much natural variation within, especially sexually reproducing species such as we are. So yes, there is going to be a variation, and in fact one of the variations that we can see is with the number of mitochondria that exist within each cell. So the mitochondria can actually replicate themselves more if that particular cell has a higher energy demand. So for example, if you are, like, let's say a marathon runner, then you probably have many more mitochondria per cell compared to someone who is unfit. So that person has a greater capacity to produce ATP in a shorter period of time. There would be natural variation, but there's also environmental things like this. So yeah, there is a large variation.
Great. All right. Well, that was our last question. So thank you. Everyone give a final round of applause for Dylan. Can we get the tuk-tuk race slides? All right, so Nerd Night has a very exciting event planned for next February that I really hope you will join us to attend, which is a tuk-tuk treasure hunt. And next slide. So this started off as an idea last year because we were celebrating the 10-year anniversary of Nerd Night. That's right, Nerd Night has been running for 10 years. Well, except that it hasn't been running for 10 years because this was almost 1 year ago, which means it's been running for more than 10 years. Next slide. So we came up with this really awesome idea to celebrate this on the 21st of February 2021. We were going to have an awesome tuk-tuk treasure hunt, and we spent months and months trying to plan this, and it was really great, and it was awesome. And then we're going to go to see what happened. Then we had 300 sign-ups that were going to contribute to this. We had 12 venues that were participating, 18 sponsored that were giving out up to 70 prizes, 70 prizes. And we were going to have an awesome pool party afterwards with a DJ as well. And then, well, you may have noticed what happened on the 21st of February, and more specifically the 20th of February. So we had to cancel the whole thing, and that was months and months of work gone down the drain. Until we get to the next one, because we are bringing back the Nerd Night Tuk-Tuk Treasure Hunt. And this is going to happen in February 2022, exact date to be given quite soon, and all of those awesome things will hopefully happen again. But watch this space. For now, I just wanted to get you involved. And yeah, we had 300 sign-ups last year, so I'm sure we'll have as many people this year. It's going to be so fun. I can't wait to celebrate the 11th year anniversary of Nerd Night. So thank you very much for that. All right. Great.
Testing. I do have a question for you, Dave. Another one.
Oh yeah, sure.
Well, other than, where do you get those puns from?
My ATP.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Anyways, what makes Nerd Night so great, though?
What makes Nerd Night so great is, you know, the funny hats and stuff. And also that we have awesome speakers, like you've just seen 3 of them today already, who have been really brave to sign up to speak and talk about their nerdy passion. And Nerd Night wouldn't be the same without speakers from the community like you guys signing up to speak, would it?
I don't believe it would. So, we are looking for some of you guys in the crowd, even if you're feeling brave enough tonight to sign up for our next Nerd Night. I just want to tell you, peer pressure works really well, okay? So definitely some peer pressure with your friends. I know it wasn't great in high school, but right now this is a really good thing to do at the moment. So we'd love some of you to volunteer. If you have a topic right now, you can, raise your hand, say that you want to volunteer, or you can wait till the end and we will check again. We also, what's another way of signing up?
So another way of signing up is you can speak to some of the team members who put this event together. So put your hands up, team members. We have Shantara, who is over there helping out with the venue. And we have Daniel, who is finding new venues and doing marketing stuff. Roswell, who is also doing a lot of marketing stuff and made actually the flyers that you'll see on the tables next to you. We have Take, who's taking photos of us. We have Fred, who is holding up Katie's hand as well. And then we have Lizzie, who's not here right now. And we have Haley, who's on the slides, making that happen so that we get all of this running very, very smoothly. And we have a guy in a hat and a woman in black. But actually, that brings me to a question. Why are you in black with a whistle around your neck?
Well, if you're wondering, it's not just because it's very slimming and looks great on me. It's because we have a bit of a surprise going on today. So, should we stay tuned for our surprise? Or should we tell them right now?
Well, we can give them a tease, can't we?
We can give them a little tease.
Yeah, we can give them a little
Just
tease.
a little bit, a little something. So we have a bit of a competition going down. And if you haven't noticed, we have pretty cool uniforms on. And we have people in the crowd that we're gonna kind of team up with for what we like to call a nerd off. Now, raise your hand if you've ever been to a nerd off before. All right, a few hands. If you don't know what a nerd off is, we can explain it. What's a nerd off, Dave?
Well, a nerd off is Well, we've had awesome presentations by people who have prepared their slides. But then we thought, well, what would happen if you have someone else preparing slides and people would present them without knowing anything about it? So for this nerd off, which we're not going to go into right now, but we have two brave volunteers, each teamed with one of us. So I have my brave person who is from Team Party Shirts and Smarty Pants, who is over there holding up his hat in his cool shirt, and he is going to rock it. You best you wait. And we also have
in my corner, my bro, my personal favorite, my man, my ride or die. We have Harry Gary over here, ready and raring to go. So things to look forward to.
But yeah, we will come back to that in a little bit. We would like to thank once again the venue tonight, Scorebar. Give a round of applause to Scorebar. Another very important partner for Nerd Night is a place called YK Art House. YK Art House has been working with us for a year or so to provide us with a place where we do our Nerd Lab rehearsals. So if you sign up, you're not on your own. We will give you loads and loads of coaching, including a rehearsal the weekend before. And they are generous enough to provide us with a space. So they have a vegan restaurant as well called Bong Bon Lai. That's a really awesome place. And yeah, and I guess on that note, stay tuned if you want to listen to the awesome Nerd Off. It's going to be fantastic for my team. But until then, let's take a 15-minute break. So grab a drink, hang out with your friends, go for a smoke. Just don't leave.
Ready to lose. Ready to lose.
And we'll see you in 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What? I really want to watch the Nerd Off. It's 15 minutes break. I want to stay too long. Go with right now and watch it. Yeah, I want to just go chill. When you get home, check your YouTube. Buddy?